The room was already loud when I arrived, the kind of loud that comes from people who feel important enough not to listen. Glasses clinked, heels clicked against polished floors, and conversations overlapped like none of them mattered on their own. I stood near the wall, smoothing my sleeves, reminding myself that I only needed to stay a little while, just long enough to be polite, just long enough not to be noticed. I had worn something simple, nothing expensive, nothing that demanded attention. That choice, I would later realize, sealed my role in their story. They were all dressed the same, confidence tailored into suits, entitlement wrapped in designer fabric. I recognized a few faces from meetings and introductions where my name had been said quickly and forgotten even faster. To them, I was background, a shadow allowed into the room because someone else had opened the door. I picked up a cup of coffee mostly to give my hands something to do. It was too hot, but I didn't mind. Pain I understood, it was the unspoken rules that always confused me, when to smile, when to pretend I belonged. That's when her voice cut through the noise. ATCHTIs. It wasn't shouted, but it didn't need to be. Authority has a way of bending sound toward it. Conversations quieted. Lauder paused mid-breath. I looked up, confused, just in time to see her standing too close. She was smiling, not warmly, not kindly. It was the smile of someone performing for an audience they knew would clap. Before my mind could catch up, she tipped her cup. The coffee hit my chest first, soaking through fabric instantly, then splashed down my arms and hands. The heat shocked me into stillness. I gasped not loudly, just enough to betray that it hurt. For half a second the room was silent. Then it erupted. Lauder burst out, sharp and unfiltered. Someone whistled. Someone else said, "Oh my God," but they were laughing too. I heard the familiar electronic clicks before I saw them, phones being unlocked, cameras turning on, red recording dots glowing like approval. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look uncertain. "That's how we treat trash," she said clearly, tilting her head as if she'd just delivered a clever line. More laughter. I stood there, coffee dripping from my sleeves onto the floor that probably cost more to clean than I'd made in my first year working. My heart hammered so loudly I wondered if they could hear it. I waited, stupidly, for someone to step forward, for someone to say it wasn't okay. No one did. A few people avoided my eyes. Others leaned closer, making sure they got the angle right. I saw myself reflected in a phone screen, stiff posture, stained clothes, face frozen somewhere between shock and disbelief. In that moment, I understood exactly who I was to them. Entertainment. I thought about saying something. I thought about defending myself, about explaining, about asking why. But years of surviving taught me something important. People who humiliate you in public aren't listening for your answer. They're waiting for your reaction, so I gave them none. I placed the cup gently on the nearest table, careful not to shake. I wiped my hands with a napkin that did nothing but smear the coffee further. My throat burned, but I swallowed it down. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, the laughter followed, growing louder as if fueled by my silence. Someone called after me, but I didn't look back. Every step toward the exit felt heavier than the last, like I was walking through water instead of air. When the door closed behind me, the noise vanished. I stood outside for a moment, breathing in cool air, staring at my reflection in the glass. Coffee, stained, small, alone. Inside, they were still laughing. Inside, they were still recording. And inside that building, none of them realized they had just filmed the beginning of the end. I didn't watch the video right away. I knew what it would show before my eyes ever touched the screen. The tilt of her wrist, the splash, the laughter. I knew it would freeze me in a moment I never agreed to be remembered for. Still, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages from unknown numbers, notifications stacking faster than I could swipe them away. By the time I reached home, the silence felt louder than the party ever had. I peeled off my clothes, still faintly smelling of burnt coffee and embarrassment, and dropped them into the sink like evidence. My hands were red, but I barely noticed. What burned more was the thought of how many strangers were replaying my worst moment on a loop. Curiosity won. I opened the video. There I was, standing too still, too calm, like I didn't deserve to be angry. The camera zoomed in right as the coffee hit, catching the exact second my face changed. Someone laughed off-screen. Someone else said, "She really did that, Ree?" Entitled, nobody gets put in place. I scrolled. The comments were worse. "Deserved. Learn your place." Why didn't they fight back? Trash stays trash. I felt every word like a finger pressing into an old bruise. People argued about me as if I wasn't real, as if I was a character written for their entertainment. Some mocked my silence. Others said I should be grateful, it was humbling. None of them asked who I was. The video spread faster than truth ever could. It jumped platforms, languages, continents, memes appeared, edits. Slow motion replays with laughing emojis layered on top. My face became a punchline before I had time to breathe. I shut the phone off and sat on the floor. Memories I thought I'd buried resurfaced. The teachers who underestimated me, the coworkers who took credit for my work, the rooms I'd been ignored in long before this one. I had spent years learning how to be invisible because invisibility was safer than confrontation. That night, it felt like the world had decided to punish me for it. A part of me wondered if I should explain myself. Write a post, defend my dignity. But I'd learned another hard truth over time: the internet doesn't want explanations. It wants reactions. It feeds on pain dressed up as accountability, so I stayed quiet. As the hours passed, the comments grew crueler, then bored, then cruel again. Strangers diagnosed my character from a single clip. They decided I must have done something to deserve it. That was easier than accepting that someone could be humiliated for no reason at all. Sleep never came. Sometime just before dawn, I turned my phone back on. More notifications. But this time something was different. A comment had risen to the top. Wait, am I crazy? Or does that look like the person from that Forbes piece a few years back? Another replied, nah, no way. They wouldn't be there. Someone else posted a link anyway. I stared at the screen, heart slowing, then racing again. The silence I'd chosen wasn't weakness, it was patience. And patience, I knew, always gives truth enough time to catch up. At first, I thought it was a joke. The internet loves false connections, half-truths dressed up as discoveries. I expected the comment to disappear beneath newer insults, to be buried under memes and mockery. But it didn't. It multiplied. People began pausing the video, taking screenshots, zooming in on my face from different angles. They compared it to old photos pulled from articles and conference panels. Side-by-side images started circulating, arrows and circles pointing out similarities like evidence in a trial I never agreed to stand in. Same scar near the eyebrow. Same posture. Same eyes. I watched it happen from a distance, like observing my own life through a window. I didn't confirm anything. I didn't deny it either. Silence, once again, did the heavy lifting for me. Then the link spread, an archived Forbes article years old but suddenly reborn. The headline didn't scream. It never had. It talked about quiet influence, about someone who preferred staying behind the scenes, about impact without ego. My name was there, but smaller than the ideas I'd built. The comments under the viral video changed tone almost instantly. Hold on. Why was she talking to them like that? This just got uncomfortable. So they humiliated someone who, wow, people who had laughed now hesitated. Some deleted their posts. Others pretended they'd always been on my side. The same internet that tore me apart began stitching together a new narrative. One that made them feel smarter for noticing the truth late rather than cruel for missing it early. Messages started coming in. Not insults this time. Journalists. Former colleagues. People who suddenly remembered my name. They asked if it was really me. If I wanted to comment. If I wanted to tell my side of the story. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been standing in plain sight for years, but only humiliation made me visible. Meanwhile, something else was happening, quieter, but far more powerful. People began asking questions about her. Who was she to speak like that? Why did she feel so comfortable humiliating someone publicly? How often had she done this before? Clips of her surfaced from other events, sharp words disguised as jokes, dismissive gestures, moments no one had cared about until now. Patterns emerged. Reputations don't collapse from a single moment. They collapse when that moment exposes the truth beneath. Companies noticed. They always do when public opinion starts shifting. Brands hate unpredictability more than cruelty, and suddenly she was unpredictable. Emails were sent, statements were drafted and never released. Meetings were called behind closed doors. I didn't attend any of them. I went about my life as normally as I could, though nothing felt normal anymore. Everywhere I went, people looked twice. Some recognized me with sympathy, others with curiosity. The same face that had been mocked days earlier was now treated with caution. Power, I realized, isn't loud. It's the way rooms change when your name is mentioned. One evening, I reread the Forbes article. I hadn't done that in years. It talked about resilience, about choosing integrity over recognition. I smiled at the irony. I had lived those words without realizing they would one day defend me better than I ever could. The narrative had fully turned by the end of the week. Not because I demanded justice, not because I exposed anyone, but because the truth, once recognized, refuses to stay quiet. And this time the silence was no longer mine alone. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They never do. They came slowly, carefully, like professionals cleaning up a mess they wished had never been made public. There were no dramatic apologies, no tearful interviews, just quiet updates that told a much louder story. A statement appeared first, polished, vague. It spoke about values and respect, about how recent events had prompted internal review. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew who it was for. Comments were disabled within an hour. Then came the changes no one announced. Her name vanished from a nonprofit's website overnight. A speaking engagement was postponed indefinitely. A board seat quietly changed hands. Each adjustment looked small on its own, but together they formed a pattern impossible to ignore. People who had laughed that night felt it too. One was suddenly taking time away. Another's profile disappeared from a company page. Someone else posted a long message about personal growth and accountability. Comments turned off before anyone could reply. Careers that once felt untouchable now moved carefully, as if any wrong step might shatter what remained. I watched it unfold with a strange calm. This wasn't victory, it was gravity I didn't celebrate. I didn't repost updates or keep score. Revenge, I had learned, is loud only in stories written by people who don't understand power. Real consequences don't need witnesses. A journalist finally reached me again, asking if I felt vindicated. I told them no. Vindication suggests I had been waiting for the world to prove me right. I hadn't. I had only been waiting for it to see clearly. They asked if I wanted an apology. I thought about the coffee, the laughter, the phones raised like weapons. I thought about how easy it would have been to scream, to give them the reaction they wanted. And I thought about how little any apology would change the kind of person who could do that without hesitation. No, I said. I want them to remember. In the weeks that followed, the video stopped circulating. New scandals replaced it. The internet moved on, as it always does. But something fundamental had shifted. People who once spoke carelessly learned that moments don't disappear just because they happen fast. Power doesn't protect cruelty when everyone is watching. As for me, life returned to its quieter rhythm. I went back to working behind the scenes, choosing projects that aligned with who I was rather than how visible they made me. People treated me differently now, more cautiously, more respectfully, but I didn't let that change me. I had learned too early how quickly respect can disappear. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about that moment outside the building, standing alone in coffee-stained clothes. I wished I could tell that version of myself something important. You didn't lose anything that night. You walked away with everything that mattered. They called me trash because they needed to believe I was beneath them. The truth was harder for them to accept, that dignity can't be taken, only revealed. And in trying to break me, they had only exposed themselves. That was the sweetest revenge of all.